Thanks for tuning in to My Valley, His Victory, hosted by me, Mackenzie Smith, where I interview Christians who love the outdoors and have walked through valleys in their lives. In a world of highlight reels and surface-level relationships, we all have faced hardships. I believe our experiences can be encouraging to others if we have the courage to be vulnerable. 2 Corinthians 1 says, "The Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God." My goal is to inspire you to come to the Creator through His creation and connect you with Christians who have been through similar experiences. I pray that this podcast encourages you if you are in a valley and pushes you to share how God has turned your past valley into His victory. On today's episode of My Valley, His Victory, we have Beau Owen, originally from North Carolina, but now living in Arizona, where he works in ministry for a Young Life camp. He loves to trail run, ski, and fly fish, and he loves inspiring others to get outside as well. He also loves pizza and movies. Thanks so much for being with us today, Beau.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited. I've been looking forward to it, so it's going to be a good time.
Yes, so excited. So why don't you go ahead and just tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself and who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Beau. I am originally from Western North Carolina, grew up there, and eventually found my way out west to Arizona when I started to pursue a job in ministry with Young Life, which is an outreach ministry that focuses on high school students, middle school students, teen moms, and friends with disabilities. And so I worked for a camping side of that ministry. And yeah, I love to do all of those things outside. I love to fly fish, ski, trail run, tons of hobbies like music and guitar and watching movies and everything. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and just what I love to do, and have a great community here in Arizona and great friends, and love to just be outside and love the Lord and love to combine those two things. So
yeah, I think it's so cool that your job is at a camp where you get to promote the love for the outdoors. I think that is so cool.
Oh yeah.
And I think, anybody who loves the outdoors, it's always thinking of how can we combine our love for the outdoors and find a job that fits it.
Yeah.
And then also, be in ministry. I love when all of those worlds kind of come together.
Mm-hmm.
So is the camp, is kids and high school students and all of those demographics, are they there all year round, or do you guys have kind of like an on-season, off-season? Walk us through a little bit of how that works.
Yeah, good question. So Young Life is unique, especially Lost Canyon, the camp where I work, where we do about 30% Young Life specific camping and then 70% non-Young Life camping. And non-Young Life would be church groups, youth groups, ministry, other ministries outside of Young Life. They'll kind of rent our property and we'll serve them kind of in the same way. But yeah, Young Life camping happens in the summer, and then we do 4 Young Life weekends in the winter. And on the field side of ministry, those are the folks that are going into high schools, going to football games, basketball games, softball games, volleyball games, going to events, and they're meeting kids where they are and building relationships, building trust, and kind of, if you've ever heard the term, earning the right to be heard. And, building that relationship so that they can bring them to camp in the summer where they hear the gospel, they get to just be a kid, they're free from distractions, free from their phone, tons of free time, not like your traditional kind of Christian camp where it's very structured. We give them a ton of freedom. Yeah, and like I said, they get to hear the gospel presented in a unique way that they can understand. And another unique thing about it is, when you go to a sleepaway camp or Christian camp, you go and you meet this counselor, and it's like, oh, hey, so nice to meet you. I'm going to be with you for a week, and then we'll never see each other again, But with Young Life, the leaders are bringing their kids to camp and then going home with them. And so we, as camp staff, our job is to prepare that space, right? So we set everything up and prepare each event and make sure that all the kids are distraction free so that they can focus on just being a kid, having fun, and hearing the gospel. And my job specifically is to oversee our challenge course elements. So we have a challenge course, a water entry zip line, a 3-person giant swing, and a climbing wall. And so I kind of oversee those specifically. So yeah, that's a little bit about Young Life and kind of what I do at camp.
Yeah, that's so rad.
Oh yeah, it's a good gig.
I'm like, can I sign up?
Yeah.
I want to just come be a participant.
Yep. Hey, we'll have you.
Don't know that I fit in any of those categories, but who knows?
Yeah, you never know.
But I love what you said about the motto, or I don't even know if you said it was your guys' motto, but earning the right to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is, wow. I was just, whenever you said that, I was like, I feel like I need to like run that back, because that is, I don't know that people think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think so many people just speak into spaces that they have no respect or no reputation or no
totally
authority in that space. And then they get upset whenever, people don't listen. And it's like, you can't jump in with like those hot button topics. Like, you gotta, till the ground a little bit first.
Totally. Yeah. You build that relationship. And then, this high school kid is like, oh, I can trust this person. Like, I can tell them things that I can't tell anyone else. And then when that happens, they're like, okay, I told you something. I'm going to listen to what, they have to say.
Right.
And it's awesome.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a really awesome job. I love everything about it.
Yeah.
In your free time, I know you like to ski and fly fish and trail run. Are those things that transferred with you from North Carolina, or are those things that you picked up when you moved to Arizona?
Yeah. Fly fishing is kind of the number one, or well, not number one, but probably the first sport that I picked up. I'll kind of get into this later, but I played organized sports, growing up, and wasn't really a big outdoor, wasn't a big outdoor enthusiast. But in high school, I picked up fly fishing in North Carolina, picked up running soon after that, a little bit after college. And then skiing, I didn't do until I was out west, because if you know anything about Western North Carolina, there's no snow there. So,
however, somehow there is a ski resort.
Yeah, and somehow people go. They're in business. Kudos to them. They're killing it. They're doing something right. But yeah, I just fell in love with skiing, and luckily was able to pick it up pretty quick, and just like dove headfirst in. And my personality too is like, okay, once I'm into something, I'm in it, and I'm full on. So, and then trail running really, it started in North Carolina, did a couple of races, but when I moved out here, one of my good friends runs professionally. And then there's a couple people out here who have, run the Boston Marathon, and I'm just surrounded by inspirational people. And so they kind of spur me on and encourage me and helped me to kind of find my passion in the trail running scene too. But yeah, I love to do those things, and give me a lot of life.
Yeah. I feel like we share this, the post-athlete life, organized sports.
Oh, yeah.
Turned adventure enthusiast.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a big category of people that I run into. It's like played sports, especially if you're like from the Midwest or, maybe not out West. Like, we didn't grow up doing these adventure sports, but I feel like it's always the people who grew up doing organized sports and at a pretty high level too are the ones who really find themselves in the outdoors, because kind of once that's over, it's it's kind of like, where do you put the outlet that you've had your whole life?
Totally.
So totally understand that. So from the trail running perspective, what is the longest race that you've done? Because I know there's like past marathons at that point when you get into that ultra category of running.
Oh yeah. So I just did my first 50-mile race this past year, and now that's my longest race so far. And before that, I'd run a couple of trail marathons, but yeah.
It's something I don't understand.
Hey,
I'm like, it looks like so much fun. Like, my friend asked me to do a trail run. I think it was only like a, I don't know, 10K or something. And I was like, I'm just not a runner.
Yep.
And literally ask me to do anything else.
Yeah.
But
you've definitely got to love type 2 fun,
I love type 2 fun, but for whatever reason, running is like the one thing.
Yeah.
Like I said, ask me anything else and I'm game.
Yeah.
Running is where I draw the line.
Totally. Hey,
I'm always like, whenever I meet a good trail runner, I'm like, kudos to you. I have all respect for you because you do something that I truly do not understand.
Oh yeah. That's how I feel about mountain bikers. I'm like, I don't want to go. It's so funny because you compare like skiing, it's like, I don't ever want to go fast down a mountain on a bike. That sounds like the worst thing, like literally possibly ever to me. But then people are like, but you ski. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's fun. And I enjoy it. But like mountain bikers are like, I don't know. It's the same thing. Like, I don't understand it.
Yeah, totally get it. So obviously you love the outdoors, but would love to know more about how the outdoors maybe plays a role in your relationship with Christ.
Yeah, totally. I think when I started to get into the outdoors and really explore, it started with fly fishing, was about the same time that I met the Lord. And so I started slowly, very slowly, started to connect those two things. And as I grew in my faith, I started to realize, or as anyone grows in their faith, you start to realize like what the Lord has given you, gifts and passions and things you love. And I think at some point I realized like, wow, the Lord has made me to experience Him in the outdoors. And I love this quote from a sermon I heard. I can't remember who exactly. Maybe it was blanking on his name, but he wrote Wild at Heart. I think it's John Eldridge. I can't remember if he said this, but he was talking about people being outside and why we have a desire to be outside. And it goes all the way back to creation. And you think about the fact that the dust of the earth is in our DNA, And so when we go outside and when we spend time outside, something feels familiar, at least to me, and everyone's different. But when I'm outside and I'm doing the things that I feel like the Lord has made me to do, it's like, man, Lord, thank you for giving me this. And I hope I'm honoring you by doing what you've made me to do, and there's so many other assets to what the Lord has called you to do: work, community, finances, whatever it may be. But I feel so called to the outdoors. And when, like I said, when I'm outside, I just feel like, man, I'm doing what I was made to do. And if you want to get even down like more technical of like experiencing a grand design, outside and everything working together all the way, this serves this, serves this, serves this, which in turn serves me, and we're meant to steward this and lord over it. And we've been given this responsibility. And so to see this design all come together, you think back from the beginning of creation to the invention of skis. Like, I don't think that was an accident,
Right.
Or, the fact that trails can be made, or the fact that mountains have snow, all these things. So yeah, not to ramble and go off on a crazy tangent, but yeah, I experienced the Lord through the outdoors because it's what He made me to do. And I now like understand that. And I'm, so thankful and that I get to, go outside and give glory to Him for that. So.
Yeah. His creation is pretty awesome. And
Oh my gosh.
I think about that all the time. I'm just so thankful that I get to experience it and that I get to experience Him through it as well. And so I love what you just said, and especially about, kind of reminding us that we are made from dust and it's like, it's in our DNA. And so there's a reason we feel, that pull to Him, especially while we're in the outdoors. So I love that. So do you have a specific story that you could share about maybe a way that God revealed Himself to you in the outdoors, or just like a moment that really sticks out that you felt His presence?
Yeah. I think there's so many. I think I'll go back to this fishing trip that I took in Colorado last year, last winter. I guess it was last spring. I have these really great friends that live in Colorado, and some of my best friends in the world. And we all love fly fishing, and we all just love being together. And we got so lucky. One of my friends, Mac, has a house on the river, the Arkansas River, that her family kind of manages. And we got to stay in that house, and it's, this section of private water, and got the mountains in the background, like beautiful river. There's like barely, you maybe see like two other people on this river. And to me, like experiencing this and like catching beautiful fish, and it's beautiful weather, and I'm with beautiful people who I love, my friends Melissa, Alex, and Peter. And it was like the culmination of everything that the Lord has designed us to do. I'm in the outdoors, I'm like experiencing Him, but I'm also in community, and I'm experiencing community. And, I kind of, in the midst of that trip, had this realization of like, oh my gosh, this is what life was intended to be, loving the Lord, experiencing the Lord outside, doing it with the people you love and care about. And then after it's all said and done, reflecting on it and giving glory to the Lord for it. And I think I just, in those moments, am just so grateful that, one, just for it all, overall, but also just that I have the ability to recognize it. And it's not like this fleeting thing and I'm just on to the next thing. And so I left that trip. I was pulling out of, like leaving the town that we were staying in, and I started to cry. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I have to leave this really great time, that was like the culmination of everything the Lord wants me to do and experience. And, I got to go back and, oh man, do ministry and work at camp. Poor me. But, so I'm leaving one thing to go to another great thing, but it's like, man, doing something I love with people I love, and the Lord is in it 100%. And that was a really good trip, and a moment of the Lord just revealing Himself to me in a really cool way, for sure.
Yeah. I love what you said about, it not being an experience that's fleeting, because I think so often the things that bring us, I'm going to call it happiness because I'm not going to say joy, because I think happiness is based on a circumstance
Totally.
And joy is a posture. But
totally,
those moments of happiness, and then it's, we get that high, but then it like fades, and then it's like, I got to get it again. And, and it's like, but like some of these things, like what you're talking about, it's like, no, like this filled me up so much. And you just have a sense of like you said, gratitude for it, instead of like, oh man, like now I got to go try to find something else to do. Like, I think just being able to like sit in those moments, because I know, whenever you finish doing something that's maybe fun, but not purposeful, it's like, you're just really sad that it's over. And it's like, you kind of almost like lose the event before it's even over, because you're like, oh man, like, you're feeling the sadness before it's over, because that like, that's what you were looking forward to. But whenever you can like wrap around that joy and it follows you home, like, I think that's so cool.
Yeah, totally.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah,
I think that's
absolutely
an amazing experience. And I'm just glad that you got an opportunity to experience everything, all together, and kind of feel that purpose, because a lot of people spend their whole life searching for that. So
yeah, definitely grateful.
Yeah. So I know that you live in a really cool place, and in the mountains of Arizona, it sounds like. For maybe a listener who doesn't live in, a super mountainous or outdoorsy area, what's a piece of advice that you would give them to connect with God through the outdoors in more of an urban environment?
Yeah, totally. I think the first thing that comes to mind is asking yourself, like, what do you want to get from the outdoors? And it's going to take some I think some self-awareness. But if you're in an urban environment and you have this desire to be outside, I think recognizing why first is important. Before you have a goal, you have to have a vision. And so if it's like, hey, I want to be outside just to be outside, then I think there's an avenue for that. And then if you're like, hey, I want to be outside because I want to experience the mountains. Okay, some other factors. You have to travel, you're going to have to do, some other things. Or if you're like, hey, I love outside when I'm with people. Great. Let's find a group or find a church. There's all kinds of avenues like that. So I think realizing what your goal in the outdoors is first is like the most important thing. And then, there's so much information on the internet. Almost too much, I would, you can get lost in it. But,
Yep.
I think if you're in an urban environment and, almost every urban environment has some kind of outdoor world to experience. You might just have to go a little bit further than you've gone before. I mean, you even think about New York, you have the Adirondacks, so you just might have to go a little bit further than you think you might have to. But I think do the research first and say, okay, I want to be outside in stillness and quiet, and I want to walk, and I'm not trying to be like the next X Games medalist. There's great resources, like you can download All Trails. It's a great app to find trails in your area, and you can filter that app to say, okay, I want one that's less traveled. I want one that's paved. I want one that allows dogs. I want one that allows bikes, and get your bike out there, or you can use apps like Mountain Project. If you're like, and that specific, like, hey, I want to get into climbing, but I have no idea where to start because I live in an urban environment. You can download an app like Mountain Project that has routes for pretty much every area in the continental United States and more. They have forums that you can go on and, hey, I want to climb. I have nothing. What do I do? And people are so great in that community, and they'll respond and be like, okay, harness, rope, shoes, go. And I would say too, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but if you attend a church and they have small groups, I know a lot of churches that have groups specifically tailored to the outdoors, and join a group, join a Facebook group, and find someone that knows a little bit more than you, make a connection and a new friend, and let them show you the way. It's not always, okay, my responsibility, it's on me. There are people out there who want to and are excited to share their knowledge about the outdoors with you. So hopefully that rant was helpful. But I think know what you want to do, like know your goal, like come up with a goal and a vision for yourself, and then just jump into some research. I'm just trying to think of like a super urban area I'm trying to think of an urban area that has no outdoor opportunities, and I don't know if I can think of one.
Yeah. There's always something, whether it's a lake or a river or a park or, public land of some sort. Mm-hmm. There's usually always something. Yeah. But no, I think that was very helpful, because I think that, a lot of people that they definitely do need to start with, like, what is their goal? Because in order to figure out anything in life, you need to know what you want to get into.
Exactly. So, totally.
I meet people all the time and they're like, well, I just want to be outdoorsy. I'm like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah,
like, because that's different for everybody. And so it's like, and I love what you said, like find someone who knows a little bit more than you and ask them questions, because I know I'm always eager to share. I know I'm in so many Facebook groups. I mean, I'm from the Midwest, y'all. I didn't grow up around any of this, and I figured it out. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if I can figure it out, I know you can too. Mm-hmm. You just got to do a little bit of research and trial and error, but probably wouldn't trial and error with climbing.
Yeah. Well, yes, that's true.
Everything else, you might be all right.
Yeah. But. I mean, when I started skiing, YouTube was literally my best friend. I mean, you would not believe, and I'm sure but to anyone out there who's like, where do I start? How to ski, YouTube, I mean, literally. Yeah. And it will, I mean, how to rig a fly rod, what mountain bike should I get? If you've ever heard of the website Curated, I mean, that is the best website, because you can go on there and they'll match you with an expert in like that specific field. And so I went on there when I was looking for skis, and I got matched with some dude who was just like working out of his apartment. He was like, sorry, I got to do the dishes real quick. I'll send you, but these people are like, want to help you get started in whatever you want to do. And he sent me a list. Hey, I think these skis would work for your goals. I think you should get these boots. They have this flex and this whatever. And so Curated, great website if you want to actually talk to someone. If you're like, hey, I'm not going to meet someone in a parking lot and go hiking with them. Some people are all about that. Some people aren't. So, just another option.
Guilty as charged.
Hey, I'm the same way. But, Curated would strongly recommend that website too. But anyway.
Yeah, no, that's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's helpful. I think that's a great resource.
Yeah.
And, if finances allow, there's also guides for almost everything.
Totally.
So, I know it's a little bit of an expense, but at least you don't have to buy all the gear to figure out you don't love something.
Yep, totally.
So, okay, well, switching gears into the title of this podcast, My Valley, His Victory, would love for you to share a season of wilderness that you experienced and what God maybe taught you or prepared you for in that season.
Yeah, I think, when we first started chatting about this podcast, and, I knew exactly what I was going to talk about. And it's this season of life that I think a lot of people have, that I went through, of just no direction, lack of direction. And so, like I said earlier, coming out of high school, I played organized sports from the time I was 4 until I was 18. And luckily my parents put me into that. They wanted me to have an outlet and wanted me to gain life skills and knowledge and, all of these things. And so year-round sports was all I knew all the way up until high school. And then, I tried to play college basketball. It didn't work out. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, what do I love to do? Like, I can't compete anymore. Sure, I can go shoot at the YMCA, but it's not fulfilling me the way that, it had in the past, where there was this camaraderie and I had teammates and we were in it together, and losses and wins and uplifting each other. And, so I lost all that when I left high school, and very, very poor student too. And so I didn't have a lot of options to go to college. So I ended up, going to community college, and I was just taking gen eds. And, people are like, what are you studying? I'm like statistics? I don't know. And I kind of got in this space of like, man, everyone's life is moving forward and I'm stuck. Like I'm still in this place. No idea what I wanted to do. No idea what my gifts were. Kind of all my friends had moved on. And so luckily I ended up going to a church my freshman year of college with a friend who had invited me. And, I kind of heard the gospel at that church, and, finally felt that I was welcome and loved, and for nothing other than just that I existed, that I was the Lord's creation. And so, to keep a longer story short, I ended up accepting the Lord during that time, and kind of that became like a huge part of my life. But, I think a lot of people can relate to this. If you're a new believer and new to your faith, man, is it hard, and so many questions, so many learning curves. And I think that comes with a lot of shame, and I think the enemy is like, new believer, I have a million ways I can attack you. And so you start feeling all these things, and things start coming up, and the enemy says, well, what about your past? What about this? Well, where are you going? You don't even know where you're going, and next thing you know, this great thing becomes really hard and shameful and guilty. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I thought I was supposed to, I thought I was supposed to feel all these things that my pastor was talking about. And so, yeah, so I'm kind of in this place of just like, man, I don't know what to do, So I end up kind of entering young life. I kind of go and volunteer for a month at a camp, and all of a sudden I really enjoy something that is not sports. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just spent a month serving for free, and I got to see kids hear the gospel. I'm still very new in my faith during this time, but I got to see what ministry looked like and what people living for the Lord. I saw men who were in their 30s and 40s, even mid 20s, faithfully following the Lord. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want that. Like, I want to be that guy, And about this same time, I get back from summer staff. I go to college. I transfer to a university where I decide to major in wilderness leadership. And so you can see all of it's coming together at this time. And it's in college, in my major, where I discover like a love for the outdoors. I learned how to whitewater paddle. I learned how to backpack. I learned how to climb. And all of a sudden, I have these things that I'm like, oh my gosh, my life is filled with things that I enjoy and that bring me joy. But the hard thing was, I was, like I said, still super new in my faith. And so those two things were very separate. It was like, okay, I have my outdoor life and my outdoor friends who none of them believe in the Lord. And then I have kind of this other life, like, okay, I'm believing the Lord and I have some friends who believe in the Lord and I'm trying to like pursue this ministry that I found so amazing. And they stay separate for a long time. And it becomes detrimental almost to me, where next thing I know, I'm living a double life and I'm using the outdoors as an escape, and like an escape from shame, instead of like this healthy outlet where I'm like experiencing the Lord. And so I'm going on these climbing trips, I'm going whitewater paddling, and I'm making horrible decisions and spending more money than I have, and all to leave this other thing behind, where I'm like, I don't want to feel bad about not living to my full potential as a Christ follower. So I'm going to go do this thing and just totally be like done, you know? And I think at some point I left college, and at some point it kind of just clicked for me, where I was like, okay, I'm not being fulfilled by these things anymore. I feel terrible about myself. Like, I feel shame. I feel guilt. I'm making, my parents are upset with me. They're like, what are you doing? You're making these, like, when are you going to get it together? Type of thing. And I did, at this point, I get a year-long internship at a Young Life camp. And so I get to go there for a year, rotate through a bunch of different departments. And it's in that year that the Lord really like shows me what I'm supposed to do. And it's like, hey, you are supposed to be in this ministry. You have a calling, you have gifts. And they were like revealed to me through the people that were working there. And all of a sudden, just like that, I had direction. And I was like, okay, I'm no longer living for myself. That's why I had no direction, is because I was just trying to like, climbing, outdoor, trip, money, material things, trying to do this thing, or trying to, fill my heart, fulfill myself. And then all of a sudden my mind switched to like, oh wait, I want to serve the Lord. I want to prepare a place where other people can experience the Lord. And then all of a sudden, I didn't have the desire to run away. I didn't have the desire to forget this other thing, this other life, these other people. And I think at that moment, that's when everything really came together. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going outside, not to escape the Lord, but because he's pulling me there and I want to experience him there. And I kind of leave like climbing and paddling behind, and I kind of just leave my old self behind with them. And I find these new passions. I am dedicated to fly fishing, dedicated to running, and then moving out here, dedicating myself to a snow sport. Started snowboarding, but now skiing. And very quickly grew in my faith and grew in just knowledge of what the Lord wanted for my life. And then I think the biggest lesson I learned out of all of this was in those times of like doubt and shame and fear, I was waiting for the Lord to give me direction. And when you don't get that, when your expectations aren't met, man, that's hurtful and it's hard. And you're like, what the heck? I've been praying for this. Like, I thought that you were going to answer me, and through great people who have mentored me and through just growth in general and maturity, I realized that the Lord wants me to step out in faith and trust that he will meet me there. And I think that realizing that has really helped me continue to pursue ministry and pursue the outdoors, knowing that, yeah, I don't have to hear an answer from the Lord. Like, I didn't hear the Lord tell me, hey, move to Arizona. That's where you're supposed to be. But I had a gut feeling and I took a leap of faith And then the Lord affirmed it in so many ways and met me in it. And so, in this, if you're experiencing a time of lack of direction and you're not sure what to do and you're waiting on an answer from the Lord, like sometimes the Lord, his first language was silence, and sometimes the Lord moves in silence. And the Lord might be waiting for you to do your part first, to take that step. And then he'll say, well done. I'm going to meet you here, and I'm going to either affirm this decision or I'm going to show you a different path. And so thankfully, the Lord has met me 100 million times in my journey from, a freshman in college to, now almost 30 years old, and finally feeling like I know exactly what I'm supposed to do on this earth. And that is to care for others in this ministry context, and to do the same in the outdoors, to experience the outdoors, and to glorify the Lord in both.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of that.
Oh, yeah.
I think that there's so much good in there. I am like, I don't even know where to go back to or where to begin.
To take a breath. So.
No, you're fine. This is usually how it goes, so it's fine.
Yeah.
I just have to pick the ones that I want to talk about.
Yeah, totally.
But no, I think you touched on so many good things, and I think that I relate so much to your story, from the organized sports to the lack of direction and just not knowing what to do. Even, that season for me was post-college. I just graduated from college, and I have 2 degrees that I have no idea that I even want to do anything in that field. Like, and so I think that is such a monumental thing that happens in a lot of people's lives that I don't think that there's a lot of resources out there about. Mm-hmm. And, we're called at a, I'll say young age, 18. I think that's still, fairly young to know what you want to do for the rest of your life. And
totally.
That's a very big, daunting decision. And, I'm also almost 30 years old, and I'm still kind of figuring it out,
Oh, yeah.
And so, I think that one, I guess my thoughts always like, just don't put so much pressure on that. It has to be what you do for the rest of your life. You know, like you can go to college, and then you can, go back to college as an adult if you need a degree for what you decide to do in the future. But
Yep.
As long as you have a bachelor's degree in something, sometimes that's all that matters. But no, I think that's such like a pivotal time. And then you talked about becoming a new believer and, feeling attacks from the enemy, because, that's the greatest time to, talk someone out of anything is whenever they're a beginner at it. Mm-hmm. And I think that, we hear the church language as, you're born again and you're this brand new person. And it's like, yeah, but I'm living in sin and my life just doesn't change overnight. Mm-hmm. And so how do you wrestle through that? And how do you, deal with the convictions that you're given? Because I think a lot of times it's like, just stop everything. And it's like, yes, 100%. Like, we do need to stop sinning. Please don't hear me say that we don't. But I think that God works in us at different speeds, and he works on different things at different times. And so like, there's big major sins that I had to get out of my way when I became a, first believer. But, he's still working those things, and I'm still getting convicted about different things in my life now. Mm-hmm. And so, I think just as a church body, it's like we need to have people, kind of come around those new believers and walk them through that. Mm-hmm. Your whole entire life is not going to change overnight. Let's just be very realistic about that. Totally. But here's what to do in these different situations. And so, I think that's where like mentorship and actually becoming involved in a church is super important, because then, and joining small groups like you were talking about earlier, because then you can have those people and that wisdom around you, and maybe not allow you to sit in shame. Because I think a lot of times shame is just what we deal with internally. Mm-hmm. When we like don't talk about it. But I think like shame almost always leaves the building as soon as we open up about it.
Totally.
And so anyways, I just love that you touched on those 2 topics. And then I'm going to ask you a question that I did not prepare you for at all.
Okay,
but
great.
You mentioned it. You mentioned it. And I just want to, I guess, like hear your opinion, because this is like one of the biggest reasons why I started this podcast is I feel like the outdoor industry is the antithesis of the Christian lifestyle. And so
Yeah.
for you, these two things had to be completely separate. And you were living in the outdoors world, living, you know, a worldly life, but you were also pursuing ministry. And those two things didn't come together.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is? Or like, I guess, like, what can we do in this space to, you know, come around that a little bit more?
Oh, man. Big question.
I know.
Yeah. It's so strange why so many Christians feel isolated in the outdoors, especially, it's just, you go to a trail race and it's like, everyone take shots. And it's not like, hey, let's pray before the race. It's like, for some reason, it's just not coming together. But, I think there are so many people out there who are, obviously you are one of them with this podcast, who are helping people recognize that the outdoors and God are one, like they're from each other. And, so I think there's a lot of people who are using social media right now to really get people into it. And which I think is super important, because I think what we talked about at the very beginning is a lot of people just don't know where to start. But next thing you know, they're on Instagram and they see this person who looks kind and who's talking about the Lord, and they're like, come hiking. And they're like, okay, maybe this is my end, And so, I don't know if I have a great answer for maybe like why those two things have always been kind of separate, but I think we live in an age of social media where it's starting to change a little bit. But it's still not, it's still taboo Christianity, in the outdoor world. Like, all these outdoor film festivals, Christianity is not like a part of those types of things. And these climbing festivals, certainly not. I'm sure there are people who are there who love the Lord, but I just don't know when we'll see a time when they really are like really meshing. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good question, but man,
it's just always funny to me because it's like, the hunting and fishing industry, I feel like you have a lot of like faith-based companies and it's pretty,
totally,
like more standard. And maybe that's because that's more like Southern Bible Belt, hunting and fishing. That's what that's known for, kind of thing.
Totally.
I'm not really sure, but I mean, I guess if anything, I'll just say, I think that there's a lot more Christians out there than we realize, but I think that what happens is kind of what happened to you. And so I would just say, like, this is my encouragement if you're listening to this, is like, bring that into that space.
Mm-hmm.
And, if the people in your world of outdoor recreation believe something different than you, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to believe the same things I don't believe to get along. But I think that like they expect you to respect their beliefs. And so I think that it's just good practice to also have them respect your beliefs and at least make it known. Because I think that's the biggest thing that I've realized is, most people, there's more Christians there. They just don't talk about it because they don't think that it's welcome.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, as Christians, we are called, that should be like one of our identifying factors, right? And I think that, we should wear it as a badge of honor. And I think a lot of times in certain situations, we wait for people to like bring it up or a space to bring it up. And it's like, no, like you need to take that step of faith and you need to like make that known.
Totally.
And I think it also sets, some boundaries as well in a way. And anyway, so I'll just say that, like, if you are a Christian and you don't feel like it's welcome, just make it known and be who you are and don't adjust to the people that are around you.
Yeah. And like we said earlier, build relationships and earn the right, to tell your story. That's happened to me, a couple times where I have these really great friends who I've spent a lot of time in the outdoors with, and they're just curious, hey, why do you believe this? And then there's your, you don't have to come out guns a-blazing, but, you can definitely work to it, but hopefully they become more, coincided, but
absolutely. So kind of looking back and recapping your journey of, this lost season, no really direction, kind of losing a lot of things that you kind of identified or put your identity in. If someone maybe is going through that same season and is really struggling in that season, what word of encouragement or advice would you give to that person?
Yeah, I think, advice like this is easier said than done. So let me just preface with that. But I think if you're in a season of not knowing where to go or what the next step is, or whether you're, a Christian or and listening to this, or you're not a Christian and you're listening to this, I think you just have to trust that the Lord has your best interests at heart. And I know that's really hard to hear because we as humans, we want the answer and we want to know, like, okay, is it choice A or choice B, or is there a choice C that I'm not even thinking of? But like I said, the biggest thing I learned and what gave me the most peace is that the Lord's waiting for me to take a step, and then trusting that He's going to meet you or meet me in that. And so I would encourage the same for folks in a similar situation of, hey, take a leap of faith, make a decision, or take a path, or choose this door, and wait for the Lord to meet you in it, and trust that His will is greater than yours. I think we have to surrender the idea that we are the gods of our own lives. Hardest thing to do in the world. But trust that God is the God of your life. And if you're not a believer and that you're like, well, I don't even believe in the Lord, but I'm in this same position too. My encouragement to you would be to seek out someone who is close to you, who maybe is a believer, or I don't know, just seek out advice. I think a lot of times we think, okay, I got to do this and I got to make a decision. But 9 times out of 10, there's someone in your life who cares about you, who will help you make a decision. And luckily, we as believers have those people in our lives, but more importantly, we have a heavenly Father who we can trust undoubtedly to be faithful in our lives. And so I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm not saying that you're going to immediately plant a seed and have an oak tree the next day, or you're not. I'm not saying you're, immediately going to see fruit, but I think patience and trust are the 2 most important things that you can learn in following the Lord. Hindsight is always 2020, so you can look back and say, oh yeah, I remember when I doubted and then the Lord totally came through for me. Thank you, Lord.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah. And I think that if we look back through the Bible, God uses a lot of people to do His will, right? And to make it all happen. And so it's by giving someone the opportunity, that might also be allowing God to work in that situation, because He might be, waiting to speak through that person.
Mm-hmm.
So
totally.
And then any advice for someone who, is a new believer, who might be struggling with their life doesn't look 100% different the next day, and they're dealing with some shame of all of the things.
Absolutely. I think the very first thing that you need to do is seek out a mentor, whether that's through a church, or you're gonna have to be bold and you're gonna have to take a leap of faith for sure. But new believers need someone in their lives who have lived life and can speak truth. Because number one, we're not meant to live a Christian life alone. And so number one, seek a community. So seek someone who can speak truth into your life and who can help you along the way, help you understand some of these theological things that are going to come with being a new believer. Because you're going to have a lot of questions. Can I do this? Well, these people do this, or, whatever. What does the Bible say? Hey, go talk to your pastor, because I don't know, and then I think the second thing is maybe the hardest thing that any believer deals with is learning to have grace for yourself. If you're a new believer, that means you're admitting that Jesus has forgiven you, that He died for you, that He loves you, that He sees you and calls you His beloved. Now, so you believe that Jesus says that about you. Okay, you have to believe it about yourself, and it's very hard. But you have to believe that you're beloved. You have to believe that you're made clean and made holy. And so learn to have grace for yourself and learn to say, hey, Jesus forgives me. I forgive me. And I think that will greatly help you in your journey of learning how to shed the weight of, learning to shed the weight of some of the sin and some of the shame that you've been carrying. And you'll come to realize that the Lord is carrying it for you and you no longer have to carry it. So that would be my advice, I think.
That's a really great piece of advice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Really great piece of advice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's key. And I feel like I needed that word because I think, sometimes like we're our worst critic.
Oh, totally.
And, we're so hard on ourselves sometimes. And so, man, I think that's such a good word for me. And I know it will be for somebody else too, because I needed that word. Man, all the time. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I give grace to so many other people, but sometimes I'm not good at giving it to myself. So thank you for that.
Oh yeah. The benefit of working in ministry is I have all those people who are older and wiser than me. So that wisdom is reaped from other people, just so everyone knows.
Well, this has been a pleasure, Beau. And thank you so much for just being willing to share your story and being willing to talk about this hard season. And I just feel like so many people are going to be able to relate because I think that most of us have been in this season, if not are in this season now of, feeling lost and feeling like we don't have direction and being that new believer that doesn't, know what all we're supposed to do and how to make it join with our life and, all of the things. And so I just thank you so much for sharing your story and for being willing to talk about it. And, I know this is one of the hardest seasons of your life. And, I think I told you this whenever we talked the first time. I was like, yeah, I'm going to need you to share your deepest, darkest secret with me. Like the first time I'm meeting you. So,
yeah.
But I just also appreciate, I was just thinking about this today. I was like, man, I've had a lot of men on this podcast, like being willing to be vulnerable. And that's like, I feel like breaking stereotypes in a way of, and so I just also thank you for kind of breaking that stereotype in a way as well. So, so for those listeners who maybe want to follow along with your journey or connect with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, I am on Instagram at the Beau Owen. So you can follow me there. And if you want to follow along with my black lab, you can follow Your Dog Fish.
The cutest little pup in the whole world.
I know. She's amazing. She's 13 weeks and we're living the puppy life. It's amazing.
Are you getting any sleep?
It's about 6 hours consistent sleep, which is honestly pretty good.
Yeah.
But she sleeps from about 9 to 3:30 every single night. No more, no less. So
love it.
Yeah. But yeah, follow along and, I love to post about skiing and fly fishing and running and would love to share it with anyone. Yeah. So,
yeah. Well, like I said, thank you so much for being here and sharing.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. And, thank you for this podcast and I think what it stands for and just grateful to be a part of it and humbled to be invited. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of My Valley, His Victory. If you or someone you know are interested in being on this podcast, please email myvalleyhisvictory@gmail.com.